Morning everyone, so let's get started with our Flutter tutorial series. Okay, so the first video is just going to be a quick intro into Flutter. At least I hope it will be quick. I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. Okay, so what is Flutter? So Flutter is basically a UI toolkit that helps you build native mobile applications from one code base for the two popular platforms. Okay, you can also build Flutter for web and also Flutter for the desktop. Right now, we're just going to focus on mobile development or Flutter for mobile development. Okay, so to get started with Flutter or to install Flutter, what I'll need you to do is just go ahead, go to the flutter.dev website, go to the get started or the documentation get started, and then install it for your specific platform. Okay, you can pause. You'll find me right here sipping some tea. Okay, that took longer than I expected of you. Now let's get back to work. Once you create your Flutter application or Flutter application, you're going to be greeted with this code. Okay, so what this is basically, it's a starter application. It just shows you what you need to get started with the Flutter application, just the basic building blocks of a Flutter application. When you actually run it, you have this, depending on what emulator you're using. I'm using the Android emulator because, why not? Okay, actually I think I should change because the iOS simulator seems to run a whole lot lighter. But anyway, in your main, this is your folder structure. I named my project something. You can name yours, of course, whatever you want. I'm sure you've already done so, right? I'm using Visual Studio Code as my editor. Go ahead and use whatever editor you want. So your folder structure. Just ignore this .dart tool and .dart idea. This is just some stuff that Dart needs to understand what you are writing. So basically, it's going to know how to guide you if you make any errors, or also if you have any specific settings for how you want your darts to be laid out. Idea just is here, assuming you have or you're using any of the IntelliJ based editors like IntelliJ IDEA or Android Studio itself. Okay, the Android folder is where all your Android code gets compiled to. Your iOS folder is where all your iOS code gets compiled to. Your build folder is where your application is compiled to once you're ready to deploy it. So if it's for iOS, it's compiled here. And I mean this is where the actual binary or the executable of your application goes, your APK or your AAP, I believe, for Apple. Okay, I've never actually seen one. I always just send them straight to Xcode. Yeah, the lib folder is where you'll be spending most of your time. This and the test folder, assuming you write tests religiously. Okay, I'm going to cover how to write tests in Flutter, but for now, not really. The lib folder has a main.dart file, and the main.dart file is where the bulk of your application is. It's the starting point of your application. Okay, now the main folder always has a main function in it. This main function runs a function called run app, and it passes in what's called a widget in Flutter, right? So all of this comes from this package up here, the material.dart package. You're not able to use much in Flutter if you don't use the material.dart or any specifically material design concepts. Okay, so once this run app function runs and you've passed in your widget, you see that the my app widget here, which is just a class, is below right here. Now in Flutter, everything is a widget. Okay, so any UI layout, any UI component is a widget, and that makes it very, very easy to basically design your UI or to lay out your UI. Everything is in a very familiar, you design things in a very familiar way. You know how to use things, and all these classes are really well named, so you don't really have any questions every time you try to use any one of these classes, right? So let's just jump into this my app class or my app widget, which extends a stateless widget. What a stateless widget is a widget that you can't really mutate the state of. I'm sure you can see on our application over here, you have an app where when you click a button, it increments by 1. Now, none of that logic is actually in the my app, right? And I'll tell you why in a bit. Well, I've already told you, you can't really change the state of your application here. What this is for is basically just to lay out your application or to have the framework of your application prepared. The my app, or every widget rather, has to override a build function. And the build function always returns a widget. Okay, as you can see here, it returns a widget. It's a build function. Don't really worry about this context. What the context is, and it's provided by the widget itself, by the stateless widget. The reason why you have this context here is you may want to do things that are, or you may want to use any Flutter specific settings, right? And most of them are exposed from this context. I'll show you what I mean in a bit, okay? So let's just go ahead and take a look at, for example, this return here. It returns another widget called my material app. So like it says here, material app creates a material app, okay? At least one of home, routes, or must be non-null. Now, material app, like I said, is part of the framework of your application. The application we're going to use is going to be based off of the material design language, okay? And with that, you have this material class which you can use to specify properties of. The title just tells you what the title of the application is. I'm pretty sure you can't see Flutter demo anywhere on the app, but if you do that, you can see Flutter demo over there. Great. The theme, like it says, the theme is the theme of your application, right? Any colors, any like specific UI elements you want to change throughout your application, you design them here. You can do some pretty cool dark mode stuff, which if you want, just drop a like below and I can show you how to do dark mode in Flutter. Okay. Your primary swatch, basically this is the primary color of your application, right? This is the color that most of your application UI elements or your primary UI elements will take up. Like you can see, this is a UI element that's primary and this is another primary UI element and the colors are blue. I can change that to, I don't know, pink. See it goes pink. You can change that to green. You see it goes green. Great. Visual density. Basically what this does is it makes the visual density of your screen adapt, right? Or it makes the visual density of your screen adapt to the app or your app to the screen, rather. So if you have a really like high pixel density phone like a Samsung S10 Pro Plus Max Mega, it's going to have a lot of pixels on the screen on that big OLED panel, and you don't want your app to look minuscule and difficult to use when people are doing that. So just throw this in here, visual density.adaptive density, to make sure that people can actually interact with your application in a more natural way. So it's going to look roughly the same on a 5.5-inch screen like this, or a big old like 6.7-inch screen from Samsung or something. Okay, now the material app here told us that there's one property that must never be null, or there's three properties that at least one of which should be defined. You have the home property here. You have the home property, routes, or onGenerate route, or builder. They must not be null. What these are is basically they tell the application what it should show on the screen, on the entry point. Okay, we here have defined home. I'll show you how to define the routes when we do some navigation, but for now, we have home set up. Okay, home also has to take in a widget. The my homepage widget is here, and it's a class that has title passed into it. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this and delete the code below, because I want to show you how to go ahead and do this stuff without me having to explain this code in a non-practical way. Just go ahead and delete that, and we'll create a quick widget called home. Okay, so to create a widget, what you're going to do is, I just like to use the snippets provided by the Dart package here. Type in STF and this thing shows up for you. Press enter and you can go ahead and lay out your widget. Call it home. When we enter, you see you have a black screen here, and I'll explain why in a bit. Now, when I typed in STF, you notice that it created something called a stateful widget. Now, a stateful widget is a widget that you can use to mutate the state of your application. It doesn't have to be a stateful widget. It can very well be a stateless widget. To do that, STL is your guy. Then you have your stateless widget. Press enter. Nothing changes except the ability to mutate state in the widget. Okay, cool. Now we have a black screen. Why do we have a black screen? When you have a widget that's a primary widget for that page, like a whole screen, if you want your UI elements to look and feel the correct way, you first have to give them a platform, right? Like a foundation to lay on. That foundation in Flutter is called the scaffold, right? Now you have a white screen. This is where you start, okay? Once you have your scaffold laid out, now you can start using properties that are provided to you in scaffold. So you can change the background color, the app bar, the body, and I'll touch on these two, app bar and body. You have the bottom navigation bar, the bottom sheet drawer, all this cool stuff, end drawer, all this other cool stuff. Okay, so inside your scaffold here, let me just go ahead and create an app bar for you. So to create an app bar, you're going to use the app bar property, give it an app bar widget, give that widget a title, and the title needs a widget as well, a text widget, because you don't need to have text there. You can have an image if you wanted to, or like a button to be the main thing that shows up on the left side or the center of your app bar. Give it a text and say my app. Take a look at that. You have your app bar created, and it also has the cool notification bar or notification shade color up here. It fills it up to the top. This used to be a pain to do like some years back in Android when you're just using like Java even before Kotlin times. Okay. Now, after this, what you are going to do is create a body. This is going to be the main section of your application. The top bar is just that, it's the top bar, it's the top part of the application, but the main part, the rest of it, that fills up the rest of your screen, has to sit in a place called body. Okay, the body can be anything like a container, anything that can contain a widget. It could be a raised button, right? Flutter won't feel bad. You have a button there as your body. It doesn't matter, right? As long as it's a valid widget and you pass in all the required parameters. So we're going to use one called center. Center just centers widget for you. It takes a child. The child can be anything. My child will be a text, and I'm going to type in the inaugural hello world. That was the first basics of creating a Flutter app. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to build out UI elements, and after that, I'm going to show you how to make HTTP requests, then some navigation, and then we'll see where we go from there. Okay, great.